Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on December 19th, 2025. The post date on the social media platform that you are watching this video on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. If you have already watched this introductory information regarding November 27th, you can skip ahead no more than precisely 10 minutes. Welcome. This video that you are watching was produced prior to November 27th, 2025, when prior to this date, it was predicted that Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel, the famous singer and songwriter, would slip and fall and severely injure his head on this November 27th, 2025 date, Thanksgiving. This is because God's signs, his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, overwhelmingly indicated that November 27th would be extremely important regarding this trail of signs leading to the date that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is now predicted to be December 19th, 2025. 22 days after November 27th. That's why the clear and relevant signs that occurred on November 27th that related to Paul Simon revealed adding 22 more days to reach December 19th. The signs we received on November 27th are explained in other videos in more detail. But for the sake of this introduction here, I will briefly describe them. But before I do, the key thing to understand here is that when Paul Simon slips and falls and injures his head on December 19th, it will prove that all of the analysis in this video for November 27th is 100% correct and true. That's the purpose of this prediction. In other words, the reason why God does this, why he lays out a trail of signs, it is in order to elaborate on the prophetic signs, because none of the prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It is through these connections and context that God is able to tell these stories and themes. And God does this in order to relay extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. And everyone needs to know how and why God pointed in advance to November 27th, why he did so. And it is explained in these videos that talk about God pointing to November 27th. Now, the skeptic will say, oh, well, he didn't he didn't slip and fall on that day. You were wrong. No. When the prediction comes to pass on December 19th, 22 days later, it will prove all of the analysis for November 27th. And therefore, it will prove that God was indeed pointing to November 27th regarding the slip and fall and injury of his head of Paul Simon. And therefore, all of the knowledge that's contained in these stories that were told in the lead up to November 27th are extremely important. And that's why when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, including all of the videos that predicted November 27th. It was not quote unquote wrong. It was 100% correct. And that will be proven to be true when Paul Simon slips and falls and injures his head on December 19th. Now, why the 22 days from November 27th? Well, one of the signs we received on that day was the first American Pope's first trip abroad to 2 nations. And on the plane flight, the news story was that he was gifted the historic bat used by player number 2. The Chicago White Sox player number 2 was gifted to the Pope, the first American Pope, on his first trip abroad to 2 nations. There's much more to that. He was on, for example, his way to the 1700th anniversary celebration of the Nicene Creed. And on that day, one of the 2 National Guardsmen died who was shot on 17th Street. And on, as explained in the other video. So we have the 2 and 2, number 2's bat and the 2-nation trip. The first American Pope from Chicago hints at the first black president from Chicago, and on. And the Pope and Obama are the 2 antichrists, except the first of the 2 antichrists, the Pope, is not Pope Leo, but will be Pope Francis, who will, or is predicted to become, or be, resurrected in April 2029. That's another subject. Okay, so we have, anyway, the 2 antichrists identified once again in God's signs. Now, Paul Simon was known to be an avid baseball fan. That's one reason why this is relevant. Also, his head injury is symbolic of people's heads being injured and their brains being injured from the things. You know what I'm talking about, the things. And the components in the things make their way to people's brains. And that will ultimately lead to demonic possession, and on, as explained in countless other Paul Simon videos. But the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, is symbolized by the number 22 in God's signs. And the Antichrists, the 2 Antichrists, will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. The reason why the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22 is because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in the book of Ezekiel, which would have been a Tav mark, and the Tav letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the last and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes come in pairs, and each chromosome has 2 arms, and so 2 and 2, 22. Now, another sign we received on this date was the death of Fuzzy Zoeller, the famous Hall of Famer golfer, professional golfer, Fuzzy Zoeller, who was known for making, and never lived it down for the rest of his life, his racist comment after he had finished the Masters and while Tiger Woods was still playing the Masters on his way to winning his first Masters tournament. The first black player to win the Masters. Again, hints at the first black president, Antichrist. Also, Tiger Woods is the GOAT, greatest of all time, and that hints at the GOAT Antichrist. Now, Fuzzy Zoeller was one of 2 players in the modern era to win the Masters in their first year as a professional. The other player was Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods is known for his big comeback when he won the Masters 22 years after he first won the Masters in his first year as a professional. And so that's why the death of Fuzzy Zoeller also reveals adding 22 days. Now, there's so much more that's so amazing regarding all of this that is, for one thing, explained in the must-watch, as if all of them are must-watch, as you should know. 2 National Guardsmen shot, 2-nation trip by the Pope video regarding Paul Simon. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. That's the introduction here. Again, like I said, God was pointing to November 27th ahead of time. So the rest of this video will talk about how and why God pointed to November 27th ahead of time. And all of the analysis is 100% correct when the prediction comes to pass 22 days later on December 19th. And so Don't be confused when in this video later on I talk about how Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall on November 27th. God was saying that. That's what God was saying. It was not, quote unquote, wrong, quote unquote. It was 100% correct. Okay, God was saying that Paul Simon would slip and fall on November 27th. But the way it works, and this is how it works, and I know far better than you or anyone how it works, is that it's not necessarily possible to know ahead of time, ahead of the date that God is pointing to, whether or not it will be the end of the trail of signs for that prediction or another step in the trail. And so November 27th was pointed to, and it was for Paul Simon's trail, and it ended up being a step. Now, December 19th might be a step. But at this time, we're going to go with the prediction that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head on December 19th. If it doesn't happen, you can rest assured there will be clear and relevant signs related to it on December 19th. And that said, enjoy the rest of the video. It must be watched. It's extremely important information, all of these videos. Welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall to the ground and severely injure his head on November 27th, 2025. And it is predicted that the news of this will be first reported on November 28th, the following day. In this video, I will talk about a subset of God's prophetic signs that are confirming this analysis. Specifically, we will be talking about Disney and other things, as usual, because it's all interconnected, and none of God's prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their connections and context with the other prophetic signs, which is only being explained on this channel, God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. And so here we can see this email was composed today, November 20th, and I'll talk about the signs that occurred yesterday, November 19th. So the title of this email, Disney, the return of Obama and Paul Simon's predicted fall. Frozen is the biggest Disney movie. Okay, it was the record-setting movie for sales for an animated film at the time, and I believe it's only been beaten twice since then, once by Frozen 2, Part 2, the sequel, and another movie, if I'm correct. Now, Frozen is also the most insidiously evil of the many evil Disney movies due to its feminism theme that it pushed on young girls. Communists understand well the satanic strategy of corrupting the young generation in order to bring down society. If you don't know, Karl Marx was a Satanist. Anyway, the movie Frozen is symbolic of Disney in general because it's the biggest movie, and Disney, and also because of its woke propaganda politics that currently infests Disney. So the movie Frozen is symbolic of Disney in general, and Disney is symbolic in general of the corruptive spirit of Antichrist. On November 19th, 2025, it was announced that 3 actors from the movie Frozen will be paid $60 million each for the upcoming Frozen 3 and Frozen 4 films. 3 actors for Frozen 3 getting paid $60 million each hints at the Antichrist's number 666, 3 sixes. This is the Antichrist's number in Bible prophecy. The movie Frozen broke the record for an animated film when it made $1.28 billion. G128 the 128th word in Strong's Greek Concordance, is the word for the Ethiopian. And God uses this in his signs. This isn't by any means the only example that I'm explaining here. This $1.28 billion profit or revenue for the highest grossing film, an animated film in history. The Antichrist, Barack Obama, was born in East Africa, near Ethiopia. And he was born exactly 128 weeks before Michelle Obama was born. One thing to add here too, the Ethiopian, that's this word in the Greek Concordance. This word occurs in the Bible regarding the Ethiopian that was on his way to Egypt as a servant of the Queen of Egypt when he was met by Philip, who was raptured. Philip was brought to the Ethiopian through what you might call a rapture. He disappeared and then reappeared. And then after talking with the Egyptian, likewise, he disappeared and reappeared. This is a parallel with what is coming, the rapture, which will be the escape from the Antichrist. Now, in the Bible, the Antichrist is symbolic, or a type for the Antichrist is the king of Egypt. So we have the queen, royalty symbolism here, the Ethiopian, and rapture symbolism with Philip, and that's all communicating the rapture. Now, that's why this 128 number occurs in context of Barack Obama, the Antichrist king. And he will return to the White House with his wife, Michelle, as the president, after which she will step down and he will become the president because he will be her vice president, beginning in January of 2029. And so anyway, that's why they are born exactly 128 weeks apart. But this movie Frozen made $1.28 billion. And that's important because this is the record number. And God uses records in general for prophetic signs. All right, now, the former CEO, the head of Disney, the former CEO of Disney, returned to his job as head of Disney on November 20th, 2022. This was a big story at the time. It was the main headline, for example, on Drudge Report. Bob Iger returned as the CEO when the Disney company was in trouble after a period of politically woke leadership that was destroying the company. The unprecedented rise in wokeism coincided with the unprecedented rise of women dominating the majority of institutions across society, including Disney. In other words, contrary to some theories of wokeism being a genealogical expression of Marxism, wokeism is the direct consequence of collective female behavioral dynamics. In other words, Western civilization is falling apart as we speak because of the rise of women. Because their independence from men is analogous, is parallel, is the same sin as the original sin in the Bible, independence from God. The disregard for God's hierarchy that he created with the independence of women is the same sin as independence from God. God did not intend for women to lead all of the institutions of society. These institutions that men created and would never have been created in the first place by women. And when women take over the institutions, it's not a given that they will continue as they were. In fact, it's a given that they won't for anyone that understands female psychology. Therefore, the rise of women is satanic. It is meant to destroy society. And the women aren't happy, and neither are the men. So don't play that card. There is an epidemic of depression in society today, and it is also the direct result of the unprecedented in human history rise of women to dominate the institutions. To conclude that this is all right and we have nothing to be concerned about, there's no basis for that. This is the first time in human history this has occurred. And anyone really that has any common sense to them will recognize that something is going to happen that's going to be different when women control society and take over the institutions. And they haven't taken over the institutions on their own merit, let's be clear. The scales have been weighted. There is and has been a war on masculinity and boys and men for decades now. It's a cultural suicide. And people ask the question, why is Western civilization intent on committing suicide? And they have really not the clearest answers, because the answer is sitting in front of their face. It is the rise of women, and it cannot be stopped. Western civilization will and is committing suicide until this changes, and it won't change. The genie cannot be put back into the bottle unless society becomes Christian again and begins to recognize God's created order. These institutions that made Western civilization so ideal are a result of masculinity, men, and Christianity. Both of these things have been done away with in the last decades, and now, in the last 10, 15 years, we have the rise of wokeism directly coinciding with the rise of a majority of women in institutions. Regarding the theory that wokeism is a genealogical expression of Marxism, there is some truth to that, but let's be clear. Helen Keller, the famous suffrage movement feminist, said that she looked forward to the day when women would be able to vote because it would inevitably lead to communism. And she was correct. She was not mistaken. She understood well what was going on. She was a communist, and she looked forward to it. But unfortunately, communism isn't good. It's the destruction, because that's what communism is. It's a farce. It's truthfully satanic, and it is intended to destroy society and bring it down. And so that's what's going on. Western civilization is being brought down by women. Unconsciously. They don't even know what they're doing. Anyway, the viral article written by a woman regarding this that was released or published a month or two ago, I highly recommend reading. It's called The Great Feminization. It's gone viral. It's definitely mainstream. Lots of people are talking about it. She's being interviewed all over the place on YouTube, for example, also. Her name is Helen Andrews. The Great Feminization. The Unprecedented Rise of Women. And it being the root of what we call today wokeism. The hysteria, the political cult, the descent into madness. It's all the result of women. Not that women not that women aren't created in the image of God. let's be clear. But women were never intended to be leading society. They're not supposed to be playing the role they're playing, and they are collectively destroying Western civilization. This is why this movie Frozen is evil. The spirit of Satan is inside Disney. And it manifests through its movies, which create culture that the culture and the young generation follows. This movie Frozen is the prime example. It is the symbolic example. That's why God is using this in his signs right now. And let me say something to be clear. I know far better than anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. This prediction that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head on November 27th. I know the reason why this prediction is being given more than you do. I know why God has given me a voice through this prediction. Make no mistake. It is to prove everything that I have just said. These are basic things. Many people understand what I am saying. I am not even that much of an intellectual regarding this subject. What I'm saying is that it's true, and the prediction will prove it, and that is the purpose of this prediction. This is how prophecy works. This is the reason for prophecy. For example, 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy for the purpose of God proving that the Bible is true and the inspired word of God. In fact, this is how I came to faith in the first place. I grew up in a godless society called Canada, where there are basically hardly any Christians left. And I am still the only, you could say, Christian in my immediate family. And anyway, the point is I wasn't raised with this and this culture. I didn't come from the Bible Belt. The only reason why I came to recognize that the Bible is true is because one day I was curious about Bible prophecy, when I was just curious about prophecy in general at the time. And myself, being the rare, if you will, honest intellectual person, which most people aren't. Most people just believe what they want to believe because of what they were born into or whatever, out of pride, because of their tribal affiliations with their family or whatever the reason. The point is that the evidence is overwhelming from Bible prophecy, is my point. And this is why this prophecy, which is essentially what this video is, that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head. And it is to prove what I have just said. The reason why God developed this sign that I'm explaining right now, and these connections to November 27th that I'm explaining right now, that involve Disney and the movie Frozen, is to prove what I have just said about Frozen and Disney and society as a whole. To talk about Frozen in any way would be to include its feminist message. I mean, that is what the movie is all about and why it was so popular. I mean, it's the most sick example of this. And so God has used this sign Frozen here, and I'll prove it to you when Paul Simon falls and injures his head on November 27th. Now, how will that be? Well, let's get into more of this video here. How does this connect to Paul Simon? The former CEO of Disney, as I just read, let's see, where was I? Now, the movie Frozen is the biggest symbol of wokeism of all time. The return of CEO Bob Iger on November 20th, 2022 is exactly 74 months before Obama will return to the White House as the CEO of America and the Antichrist. 74 because it hints at 7-4, the date 7-4, which is symbolic of America. Some people ask sometimes, why am I so focused on America in God's prophetic signs? The reason is simple. Because God is. God isn't politically correct. He's not woke. If you're asking that question, you are in the gray zone already of being a woke, politically correct person. The truth is that God chose the Jews. He's not politically correct. And he chose America. America is God's Gentile nation. That, for example, he used as a disciple of Christians, a nation of disciples, to spread the gospel around the world in the 19th and 20th centuries. And Jesus said he wouldn't return until the gospel had gone around the world. And that was the result of America. That wouldn't have happened without America and also the other English-speaking countries that God blessed. Now, so that's the reason for the 74 months exactly, from the return of the CEO of Disney to the return of the Antichrist, the CEO of America. Now, November 20th, 2022 is 36 months exactly, and 36 since it's 666, because it is 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. And so Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, returned 36 months before 3 actors were paid $60 million, which was a 666 sign for the movies Frozen 3 and Frozen 4. This connection is also 300.00% of a calendar year. The announcement regarding Frozen 3 and 4 came on the same day as the news of the new Mummy 4 movie. Frozen 3 and Frozen 4 hints at the Hebrew idiom repeated in the book of Amos, quote, for 3 transgressions and for 4, unquote, which hints at Paul Simon and the album Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. Wednesday's the 4th day of the week, giving us a 3 and a 4. But also, 3 a.m. in ancient Israel was the beginning of the 4th watch of the night, another 3 and 4. Also, this album was produced, this was the first Simon and Garfunkel album. It was their first album after they signed with their first label when Wally Amos signed them to the label. Wally Amos lured them into his office with a gift of cookies, and Wally Amos went on to found the biggest cookie company in American history, Famous Amos Cookies, which hints at the famous prophet Amos in the Bible, within the first chapter of which is this repeating idiom, for 3 transgressions and for 4. The idiom means, in English, the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction are unavoidable, which is what Paul Simon's fall and then death will symbolize. It'll symbolize the bookend, if you will, of the warning to repent and turn back to God that were the 9/11 judgment events. And Paul Simon performed or opened the first broadcast 4 days after 9/11 of Saturday Night Live in New York City. And the 4th album of Simon and Garfunkel is Bookends and contains the song America, which is why the beginning of the warning coincided with Paul Simon, with his performance, and the end of this period of warning, of opportunity to repent, will have Slidden Away, one of his big hits from his 4th solo album, will be symbolized when Paul Simon dies. It'll be the bookend to the warning of judgment. Now, speaking of the performance on the broadcast, he performed The Boxer. Boxing is about punching someone in the head and them collapsing onto the mat. Well, Paul Simon is predicted to fall and injure his head. And of course, he performed after the buildings collapsed, 4 days after. Now, the mummy theme with this movie Mummy 4 hints at Revelation 9:11 and the demonic possession of the masses through their heads or brains. This is one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven, as described in the book of Revelation, which hints at Paul Simon, because his first big hit was Sound of Silence. Okay, the reason why he'll injure his head is because it'll be pointing to the upcoming demonic possession of people who take the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, and this will be facilitated through brain waves in their brains. So that's why the head injury for Paul Simon, that's predicted. So we have Frozen 4 and Mummy 4 on this Wednesday, as in Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Okay, and this is 4 plus 4 days before Simon's predicted fall and injury of his head. Okay, and again, Paul Simon performed 4 days after 9/11 when the fourth plane crashed at a 40-degree angle and created a 40-acre pit that killed 44 people, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh. Because in Revelation chapter 9 and 11, verse 11 here, that's symbolized by this, the demons rise from the bottomless pit. On the same day that Bob Iger returned to Disney, Cordarrelle Patterson of the Atlanta Falcons set the record for kickoff touchdown returns at 9 in his career on November 20th, 2022, in a game against his former team, Chicago, which God uses for pointing to the president who is from Chicago, the Antichrist Obama. CDC also because it symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. It is, for one thing, the headquarters of the CDC, Atlanta. Speaking of injuries of the head and demonic possession after one takes the thing, that the CDC is responsible for, that causes the demonic possession of people through their heads. The headquarters are in Atlanta. Also, Atlanta comes from Atlantis, and that's a theme of technology without God, like the Tower of Babel story, leading to destruction, as in the mythological Atlantis falling under the ocean. Okay, well, he wore, this player, number 84, which further confirms that this points to Obama. Because Obama is equal to 84. The word Obama is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria. And he was born on the date 8/4. This Falcons game was exactly 128 weeks after the Atlanta Falcons team members, and in a minute I'll explain how November 20th connects to January 20th, when Barack and Michelle Obama returned to the White House, and again, they were born exactly 128 weeks apart, okay? But hold on, I'm going to explain how November 20th connects to January 20th, 2029. Well, I'll say it right now, why not? It's exactly 19 times 2 months. And the name Obama is equal to 192 in English gematria. So Obama is equal to 84 and 192, which is why we have this 19 times 2 months. But this date right here, this is again, like I mentioned earlier, 74 months because of America being symbolized by 7/4. But also it connects with, like I mentioned here, 36 months to the Disney signs on November 20th, 2025, which are 19 times 2 months. to the return of the Obamas, who were born 128 weeks apart. Well, anyway, this Falcons game, and God uses records for signs, with the record touchdown return, kickoff return, which was the 9th, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's prophetic signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. And Obama was inaugurated in 2009. And so this Falcons game was exactly 128 weeks after the Atlanta Falcons, same team, the team members of this team, marched in the woke Black Lives Matter protest on Pentecost on June 20th, 2020. This was the day that it was reported that the death toll had reached 110,000. That's profound because that's what Pentecost is all about. There is a parallel, Pentecost occurred on the feast of, the walls of security collapsed on the ancient city of Jericho on Pentecost. If we follow the timing of events in the book of Joshua chapter 6, it follows the timing from the spring feasts to Pentecost. Okay? But also, God has confirmed this overwhelmingly through his big picture of signs. This is one example of a number of indisputable examples of how God has proven that because he has demonstrated a parallel of signs with the timing of events in the book of Joshua. And so Joshua died at the age of 110. And that's why on this June 7th Pentecost date, 2020, the official death toll, supposedly, was 110,000. It was a prophetic sign, confirming what I've just said, which is that the walls of security of Jericho collapsed on Pentecost. Okay, now the Black Lives Matter protest obviously is arguably the biggest example of the political manifestation of wokeism. The hysteria that gripped the nation, especially in late May, early June of 2020. And the big sign, one of them, was this Pentecost with 110,000, but also the Atlanta Falcons team marching, because Joshua, who died at 110, marched the Israelites around the walls of security of Jericho before they collapsed in God's judgment. Now, the Falcons are known for losing the extremely prophetic 3-28 Super Bowl to the New England Patriots, the most important sports team in God's signs, symbolizing America. I can't explain that obviously right now, but okay, so that's why this Atlanta Falcons marching sign in the Antichrist protest was exactly 328 years to the very date, June 7th, after the real-life Atlantis disaster in Port Royal, Jamaica. In fact, I forget the names now, but the leaders of the Puritans at the time in New England were using this event as a warning of judgment from God for them even, because it was in their hemisphere, okay? It was Port Royal, and what happened was there was an earthquake. This was at the time the most populous settlement in Jamaica, which at the time was part of the British Empire. It was basically the same thing as the New England territories, right? And anyway, because of the earthquake right off the shore of Port Royal, there was the tsunami. And then following that was the mudslide from the nearby cliffs that pretty much killed everyone. Okay. And so Atlantis, Port Royal today, most of it today is underwater. Still today. There was a drop of the land into the sea. So it was the real life Atlantis. And that's why it connected with exactly 328 years to the Atlanta Falcons sign. And Atlanta, again, is named after Atlantis. It's the same root word. It comes from Atlantis. All right, now, so this 128 weeks connection to Disney confirms the $1.28 billion that Frozen made, Disney's biggest movie. Michelle Obama was born exactly 128 weeks after Barack. The kickoff return by number 84, and the leader of Disney's return as the CEO on this November 20th, 2022 date was 8 weeks and 4 days, and again his number was 84, after the announcement of Michelle Obama's book tour to 6 cities. This 8 weeks and 4 days is also 60 days, which hints at the 6-city tour and the $60 million each of the 3 actors are being paid. Michelle's 6-city book tour announcement for the book The Light We Carry, which hints at Lucifer and the morning star, because that's what Lucifer is in the Bible. He's called the morning star. Lucifer means light bearer. This 6-city tour was announced 6 + 6 + 6 days after the death of Ken Starr, as in starlight, as in Lucifer, morning star, who is obviously known for his inquisition of the 42nd president. And the number 42 is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. All right, and so that's just more confirmation of all of this, because it connects to Michelle Obama, and she will return as the president on January 20th, 2029, with Barack as her vice president. Okay, and that again is exactly 74 months after this date, but it's also 19 times 2 months after the Frozen sign, which again was 36 months, and again 36 hints at 666 after the return of the CEO of Disney. And so I recognized at the time, on November 20th, 2022, when the main story on the Drudge Report page was the return of the CEO of Disney, I recognized that this was a prophetic sign hinting at the return of the CEO of America, Barack Obama. And now, years later, 3 years later, exactly actually, we now know how it does connect to the day that Barack Obama will return to the White House. It's astounding. Oh, and coincidentally, as I just said that, we are at 36 minutes into the video and 30 seconds. Again, 36 is 666. But I don't use personal signs like that to prove anything. That's just a, hey, that's interesting kind of thing. Paul Simon opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live 4 days after 9/11. On November 19th, 2025, Brendan Fraser announced Mummy 4. He's the star of the movie, the Mummy series. He announced Mummy 4 on this November 19th date, which hints at 9/11. And Paul Simon sang right after 9/11, 4 days, and that's why Mummy 4 on the date that hints at 9/11. And Brendan Fraser hosted Saturday Night Live on October 18th, 1997, exactly 22 years before Event 201, on October 18th, 2019. Event 201 was the pandemic drill that preceded the actual pandemic. And this was evil because these so-called elites got together to discuss how to take apart the Constitution in the event of such an event. And so this protocol, if you will, got passed down. There were a number of these events to brainwash slowly over time the people in charge of institutions, including the media, on how to disregard the Constitution in the event of a pandemic. And that's exactly what happened. By the way, the creators of the Constitution, the writers, were not unfamiliar with the concept of a pandemic. In fact, the American army was on its way to conquer the British Canada and take Montreal until they had to return because of a pandemic. So they fully understood what a pandemic was. And yet they did not include any such situation in the Constitution to account for how it should be disregarded during a pandemic. Brendan Fraser was born on the same day that Elvis Presley's 68 comeback special aired on NBC. Simon's Graceland album is obviously a hint at Elvis. Okay, his mansion, Graceland. And Barack Obama, the name Barack Obama is equal to 68 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. Now again, Brendan Fraser announced the movie Mummy 4 36 months after the return of the CEO comeback of Bob Iger. And again, Brendan Fraser's announcement connects with the comeback of Barack Obama, the Antichrist King. By the way, the Graceland Mansion is in Memphis, and Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. And the King of Rock's mansion is symbolic of the king's palace in Egypt. And in the Bible, the king of Egypt, inside his palace, is symbolic of the Antichrist King, inside the White House mansion. Okay? So that's why it's all relevant, this connection between the 68 comeback and Brendan Fraser here. Because Brendan Fraser was born on the same day. And again, the Brendan Fraser sign on November 19th is pointing to the comeback of Barack Obama. 19 times 2 months later. And 192 is equal to Obama in English gematria. If I didn't mention already, I probably did, I assume, the Mummy 4 and Frozen 4 sign on November 19th is 4 plus 4 days before Simon's predicted fall. I said that, I hope. Yeah. No, did I say that? Yes, I did. Up here I said that. All right. Now, Fraser announced Mummy 4 on the same day Frozen 4 was announced, and this is 19 times 2 months before the comeback of the 44th president. Hence why Fraser was born on the day of the comeback of the 68 comeback special. Back in those days, of course, TV wasn't the way it is today, and TV specials like this were a part of the collective culture. There's no collective culture anymore, not in the last 15 years, because people watch all kinds of different things. There's no collective thing where everyone knows about it, you know? But that's not the case back in the 68 comeback special time. Anyway. Okay, so Obama is equal to 192. Okay, so I think we are finished with this video here. The closing stock market number of 6,754 in the S&P 500 stock index on October 7th, 2025 was 6,754 days after the death of famous author Kurt Vonnegut. Okay, so this is a paragraph that actually bleeds into another email thread and series and trail of prophetic signs involving this very prophetic date, October 7th, 2025, which was recognized to be pointed to by God ahead of time. And long story short, or rather, without getting into the details for confirmation for its relevance, just go with me here. One of the signs on this day was the S&P 500 stock market index number, which was 6,754. Okay, and now this day was 6,754 days after the death of Kurt Vonnegut. Now, Vonnegut, and so, to explain that too would be to, explain more about Kurt Vonnegut. But he authored the novel Cat's Cradle about a substance called ice-9. Ice-9 is an anagram for vaccine. It hints at vaccine. It's also, for example, a substance. The vaccine is leading to demonic possession. Those who take it will become demonically possessed. I should say those who have taken it will become demonically possessed. 43 days after this October 7th date was the announcement regarding the movies Frozen 3 and Frozen 4. Okay? The 43 days hints at Frozen 3 and Frozen 4. But I think I've already explained, hopefully in this video, how the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4 is relevant. I'm sure I have, given Frozen 3 and Frozen 4. But that's also the reason for 43 days. Again, Paul Simon's album, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Wednesday, the 4th day of the week, 3 a.m., beginning of the 4th hour of the night watch in ancient Israel. And anyway, so 43 days hints at Frozen 3 and Frozen 4. That confirms the connection. But also, Frozen obviously rhymes or connects with ice-9. Okay? The number 9, by the way, is the most important number in God's prophetic signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. Frozen 3 and Frozen 4 hints at the 9th Fibonacci number, 34. And so Frozen hints at ice-9, which hints at the vaccine that leads to demonic possession. Which is the reason, and by the way, there's reasons for why ice-9 hints at vaccine. It's not only an anagram, it's a substance. It's also technology in the fiction of Vonnegut's, an advanced technology that's world transformative. So this is the reason why on the day of the announcement regarding Frozen 3 and Frozen 4 was the announcement regarding Mummy 4. Because Mummy hints at the demonic possession. It's like this same theme God is using with zombies in his big picture of signs. So a mummy is like a zombie, if you will. A zombie and a mummy are dead, animated dead corpses, right? Okay, so that's demonic possession, which is why in that prophecy in the book of Revelation, it says that these people who will become demonically possessed will seek to commit suicide and be unable to do so. The announcement regarding Mummy 4 was made by Brendan Fraser, the star of the Mummy series. Fraser hints at Frozen. Okay, so this is just a tangent. Really, there's more to be explained, and I'll explain more regarding Kurt Vonnegut in another video. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived, and more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.